what a weekend, man. What a weekend in Seattle. 41,000 on Friday night, Jeff. 37,000 on Saturday. Nearly 30,000 yesterday. I called it to this point. You could maybe argue the Detroit series after the Yankees sweep was a bigger series heading into the All-Star break. But to this point, with now 49.
No. This was by far the biggest series of the year. And that's where the Mariners and Mariners fans, and I'm sorry to cut off your question, Brock, but they can take solace in that. They can derive excitement from that because this was what the Seattle Mariners envisioned, not just when they traded for Josh Naylor, not just when they traded for Geno Suarez and Caleb Ferguson. This was the sort of weekend that they envisioned from the beginning of this rebuild. And I don't know what the rest of the season is going to play out like. It is baseball, and so really weird things are capable of happening. But what Mariners fans were treated to this weekend, I thought, was a beautiful display of baseball where they went up against a very good team in the Texas Rangers, a team that they're going to be fighting tooth and nail the rest of the way for a playoff spot, and not only won the series, but did so in really impressive fashion, beating Jacob deGrom yesterday.
Yeah. Is that why you characterized them and gave them, as you put together an article this morning, the Joe Robuchon Award? And who exactly is Joe Robuchon?
Joel Robuchon is arguably the best chef in the world, Brock.
Of course he is. Yes.
That is yes. In fact, if you go and I made a reference to this, but the best mashed potatoes that you will ever eat are Robuchon potatoes. And I encourage you to find a copycat recipe. It seems like there's a little too much butter in them. I promise it's worth it. Okay. I promise. Sometimes you got to splurge, Brock.
So this is because they're cooking, and what they did at the deadline was as good as anybody in the league, if not better?
I had the A's having the best deadline, which is funny because all they got was an 18-year-old prospect, but he's going to be really, really, really good. And so, yeah, I would say of all the teams that bought, the Mariners were the best, yes.
And part of that, I think, Jeff, was the fact that they got what they got without having to give up as much as some people thought they might. How surprised were you that they were able to make those additions without giving up some of their top prospects?
You know, it was really interesting because the market for Eugenio Suarez did not materialize in quite as strong a fashion, I think, as I expected and as others expected. Maybe that was just a poor read by me, not understanding that, generally speaking, the guys who draw, and we saw this at this trade deadline, Brady, the guys who draw the most demand in a summer trading market tend to be relief pitchers. And the Mariners guys were right there on Joan Duran. In fact, at one point, I think it was the afternoon of the 30th, so day before the trade deadline, I thought the Mariners were getting Joan Duran. Like, I was waiting for some texts saying, Duran to the Mariners. Duran to the Mariners. And instead, I was greeted with a Ken Rosenthal tweet that said Duran to the Phillies. And that kind of threw me a little bit, not going to lie. Like, at the trade deadline, there are only so many things that you can follow at one time. And when you think you got something wired pretty good, sometimes you'll take the gas off it, and I did, and I got smoked on that one. And I thought the Mariners, what are they going to do? How are they going to recover from this? Because they were hoping to bulk up the back end of their bullpen with one of the best closers in baseball to be there in addition to Andres Munoz and Matt Brash and Gabe Spire and the rest of the crew. Suffice to say, they pivoted really well, and I think a lot of credit is due to Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander for the way that they handled this trade deadline, because they did so with urgency. Tyler Locklear is going to be a good big leaguer for a long time, I think. I don't know if he's ever going to be in the MVP hunt, but I think he's going to be a solid first baseman for the Diamondbacks for years to come. And to give him up for somebody who's going to be a free agent at the end of the season, I mean, that to me, it suggests that the Mariners are doing things that they have not done in the past because they recognize that this window is open and not only a playoff spot, but a pennant is there for the taking.
Yeah, we're going to get to Houston here in just a second. Just kind of curious because we felt the same vibes, Jeff, that the Durant thing could happen and could happen the day before. Do you think ultimately it was them saying, I'd rather send him if it's even at all, let's get him out of the American League and send him to the National League and we don't have to compete against him? Or what do you think happened in the 11th hour?
Philadelphia upped its offer and the Mariners were not willing to match it. And we saw, in the days leading up to it, guys, you guys saw me report, the Twins want 2 top 100 prospects for both Joan Duran and Griffin Jacks.
Yep.
And I don't think the Mariners were quite there. And then the Phillies, who I'd been told earlier in the day were out on Duran. There was an offer where they could have sent Eduardo Tait to Pittsburgh for David Bednar. I figured Philadelphia was going to go the Bednar route or go somewhere else, but give Dave Dombrowski credit. When the man sees something he likes, he goes after it. And they upped the offer to Tait and McAble, and at that point, the deal was done, and the Mariners needed to turn to something else.
Jeff Passan joining us here on a Monday. He's got some training to take care of tomorrow, so he had to bump it up a day to join us here on a Monday. You're right, Jeff. We got to fight, like being prisoner of the moment and not, suggesting that just because you won an amazing series, take 3 of 4, that this now portends to things over the final 49. But I do feel like in all of our years of doing this, and the Mariners have been relevant. They've been in a playoff chase basically the last 5 years, right, that we have been doing this. I can't remember you joining us here in August with a team this deep. Pitching rotation with Bryce coming back. Lineup now stretching 1 through 9. Some bench players added to a little bit of the bullpen. Can you remember a Mariners team in our years of doing this being as deep as they sit here today?
No. In fact, that is exactly what I wrote today. And I'm trying to find it right now, but my internet's not working and my ability to navigate this isn't as good as I thought it would be. But I think the important point is they're almost at full strength right now too, right?
Yep.
Bryce Miller looked awesome in his last rehab start at Tacoma. Fastball was up to 98, and secondary stuff was good. Was not throwing balls. I think it was 42 strikes on 52 pitches. Like everything you want to see from Bryce Miller was there. And I found it. This is what I wrote today. The New Look Mariners took 3 of 4 from the Rangers, with whom they entered their series tied over the weekend. Seattle was almost fully healthy, and with Bryce Miller carving in his rehab assignment with a fastball tickling 98 miles per hour, and Victor Robles potentially back in September, the Mariners are 2 recalls away from having the scariest squad they've had since their resurgence started in 2021. I think that is an astute assessment by you, Brock, and I fully agree with it. Because when you look at this team and compare it to the rest of the teams across the American League, I don't think anybody touches them when it comes to starting pitching. I think their lineup, if not as good as some others from April through July, stands at least right next to pretty much every other lineup in the American League right now, if not on top. Their bullpen has gotten better and is going to be deeper in the playoffs when, theoretically, they will be able to use Bryce Miller out of it. And it's just going to be a matter of getting there and playing clean baseball. I think if the Mariners can do that, they're as good of a team as there is in the American League.
Jeff, what's going on in Houston right now? They've got swept in Boston. They've lost 8 of their last 10. What do you think is going on with the Astros?
I think regression, Brady, is a real thing, and the Astros were winning baseball games with Victor Caratini batting in the 3-hole. And look, I think they did a nice job. They got Jesus Sanchez, they got Ramon Urias, and they added Carlos Correa back. They're going to be getting Spencer Arrighetti and Christian Javier off the injured list. So this is a team that's going to get better. I'm not going to look at the Astros right now and suggest that they are bound to falter. I will say this, though. The American League West is up for grabs, and if I'm picking a team right now to win it, I think it's going to come down to the last week, and I think the Mariners are in an excellent position to take that division and potentially, this is wild to think, but potentially a bye that comes with it. I mean, they have to go on a run here, but I don't think 2 seeds out of the question for the Mariners at this point.
Jeff, do matchups matter in baseball like they do in basketball, like they do in football? The Mariners, let me rattle, you know these numbers, but let me rattle them off for the audience. The Mariners are now 10-3 versus the Rangers in 2025. The Mariners are now 38-9. 38-9 versus the Rangers in Seattle since 2000, and overall since 2021, the Mariners are 51-26 versus the Texas Rangers. Do matchups matter in baseball?
I thought you meant matchups like lefty, righty, and platoon type stuff.
Nope.
No, I don't take a whole lot out of like season series, and teams just change year over year so much, Brock, that I think that those can be misleading. But I will say this, if you have players on the Rangers who have faced Logan Gilbert and Luis Castillo and Brian Wu a number of times, and they just haven't been able to, George Kirby too, and Bryce Miller to that extent, and have not been able to hit them, I think there's something real to that. I think there's something legitimate there, and the place where sample becomes reliable tends to be larger than what you get in those player versus team matchups. So they're always a little bit iffy, but there are just some guys that teams hate facing. And if the Seattle Mariners pitching staff was in that group, I would not blame anybody for not wanting to face them.
I like those words, real and legitimate, because when you start to look at the numbers of baseball, right, you can really sink your teeth into it. That's a real number. That's a legitimate number. Julio Rodriguez, in the history of the game of baseball, joins Darryl Strawberry and Bobby Bonds as the only 2 players in their first 4 years to get to 100 home runs and 100 stolen bases. If there's one name that we have talked about over the last 4 years with you more than any other singular name for the Seattle Mariners, it is Julio Rodriguez. How do you put that kind of history into context?
I think it's just a reminder that for all of the frustration that Julio has caused and can cause the fan base, it's worth remembering that this guy has been consistently much better than the average center fielder. Now, because the expectations that accompanied him when he arrived, better than the average center fielder tends not to be the metric by which they want to measure things, right? Yep. You want to measure them. How does Julio compare to Bobby Witt Jr.? And how does Julio compare to Corbin Carroll? How does he compare to the contemporaries with whom he ascended to the big leagues? And at this point, he's not either of them. But that's okay. He plays excellent defense at the third most important position behind shortstop and catcher. He plays excellent defense in center field. He hits home runs. He steals bases. Does he have weaknesses? Yes. Can those weaknesses be overcome? Yes. Is he going to overcome them? To be determined. But in the meantime, I think focusing on the things he doesn't do well is wrong. I think looking at who Julio is right now and what he brings gives you a sense that, hey, this is a real player on a championship caliber team. And taking that for granted, I'm not going to use the word anymore because I don't do this. I learned my lesson, but I'm just going to say be appreciative of what you've got and not what you want.
Last couple of minutes here with Jeff Passan. I'm curious, and I'm not going to make you go down this chase of numbers because it would be a little bit arduous, but I'm just kind of curious your gut feeling that if you were to look at teams with 50 games to go in a season, which is where we find ourselves in the home stretch of this year, and right now the Mariners have the second best record in all of baseball against teams with winning records. And I'm just kind of curious, do you think that matters to kind of predict here down the stretch? And if you've done that in the first 110 games and you've played, and you've beaten DeGrom, and you've beaten Skubal twice, and you've beaten Skeens, and you've beaten, good teams, and you find yourself with the second best record against teams over 500 in all of baseball, does that portend anything?
Well, I think I take two things away from that. The first is, why are the Mariners not doing better against bad teams?
Yep.
Right? If you're beaten up on the Kings, then you shouldn't be losing to the Jesters. But that happens sometimes. So the thing that I do take away from it is, yes, that is a small sample that I buy, Brock. Mm-hmm. Because what is the baseball postseason if not a small sample? What is the baseball postseason if not indicative of your ability on any given day to go up against the best pitchers in the world and beat them? That, to me, suggests that the Mariners are capable of stepping up against capital D dudes. And that's something that I want to see out of my team, because if they went against Skubal and DeGrom and Skeens and were just throwing up zero after zero, wouldn't we be sitting here and saying, this might be a problem, guys? No, it's not a problem. Now, come October, it could be different scenarios and different feelings. Yes. I mean, different everything. Like the playoffs are heavier. Do you have the shoulders to bear that burden?
It kind of feels like teams when you play franchise quarterbacks in the NFL. You can gather a bunch of wins. Seahawks did that last year against some rookies and some young. But when you play Stafford, when you play Mahomes, when you play Josh Allen, right, isn't there probably something analogous to facing the top guns in baseball as well?
I think it's a perfect analogy, and I think you're spot on.
Okay, last thing here for you, man. Just it's good, man. It's just goodwill, right? Excitement, good vibes, as Eugenio loves to say. On top of everything that the big league club is doing, on top of everything they got done at the trade deadline, to see yesterday Jurangelo and Colt Emerson in particular, their top prospect who's been on fire, now called up to Double-A Arkansas as well with Las Montez and Arroyo. So just, I guess, to put a bow on this entire half-hour conversation about the Mariners, both on-field product at the major league level and what's to come and what's going on behind the scenes, how would you characterize it?
Life is good if you're a Seattle Mariners fan, Brock.
Life is good, Jeffrey Passan. Life is good. Thank you, my friend.